going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of JaAR. JaAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe
and Amy
Review. This is our now back to weekly show where we review the Magic stories. But these days, older Magic stories, which we were inspired to do by the fact that we returned to Zendikar for the third time. So we are here...
Return to Zendikar.
Exactly. So we are here this week for the continuation of the back review of Battle for Zendikar / Oath of the Gatewatch stories. This week, story number 2, kind of, at least they're not numbered, but we're numbering them. Story number 2, Stirring from Slumber by James Wyatt. My quick review at the top is this story was great. I really enjoyed it. I thought the writing was spectacular, which is not a surprise. James is very good at what he does. And I think especially with coming off of Zendikar Rising, with Nahiri being a heavy focus, this being a Nahiri story, spoilers, although look at the thumbnail of the video that you clicked on, you know it. Yeah, with Nahiri being the focus, and you getting a little bit more context for what happened if you were unaware in the lead up to her confrontation with Sorin, and just her, you know, waking up on Zendikar to the Eldrazi and what that means, especially with her story from Zendikar Rising. I thought this one was a pretty important one. So, yeah, what about you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so this story was super important, and I think that it really confirmed my analysis of the most recent story that was written. Yeah, I have a lot to say about it. I shouldn't say a lot. I have a few poignant things to say about it. I'm looking at the big picture with what I have to say about it, so.
Okay, good. So that is our quick review, or those are our quick reviews at the top. So that is to encourage you, if you are interested, to go and read that story for yourselves before watching this video, if that is something that you'd like to do, so that you can then join in the discussion in the comments down below, just because here, while with the older stories, we're going to kind of do a little bit of both. We're not going to do an amazing job summarizing and say, and then this happened, and then this happened, and because we're going to be trying to analyze it and review it as well. We're just going to have to give a lot more context because it's an older story as opposed to, everybody read this one the other day, so here it is. So, yeah, we'll...
Well, but I mean, after reading this, I kind of forgot it wasn't a newer story. And I kind of mentioned that to you. And
that was like, great. I like that.
Oh, yeah.
That was cute.
You know, and then you kept on reading, and it was like... It had the perfect feel to go with the most recent story, too.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. I agree with that.
They're looking at different snapshots in time for the same character, and they're still... How do I say it?
I don't know.
There's none of that feeling that I got at many, many points since they changed over from the story team.
The in-house story team.
Right. There's none of that feeling of disjointedness, of mischaracterization, where a character starts at point A, and then in the next story they get to point B, but somewhere in there the journey feels wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't match up quite the way it would if the characterization was flawless. And I feel like taking this story and taking the most recent story feels like just two snapshots of time on Nahiri's timeline.
Okay.
They feel...
cohesive?
Yeah,
sure.
Like they coexist perfectly the way that they should for being the same character.
Good.
So.
Good. So then, I mean, we kind of already did, and that's totally fine, by the way, but on to the full review itself. Yeah, totally fine, obviously. we find out, because again, they do a recap in the beginning to give you context for where we are now and why. Amazing. Love that. We're finding out that Nahiri is going to awaken from her slumber, right? Stirring from slumber, where she is waiting to make sure that Zendikar is protected from the Eldrazi, / the Eldrazi are not awakening further and ravaging Zendikar in general. And that the Hedron prison is working. But this story informs us in the beginning that this is actually not Rise of the Eldrazi. That's not what this is. This is actually 1,000 years before Rise of the Eldrazi, which is, I think, why it more appropriately shows Nahiri and Nahiri's motivations, because it talks about what happened. It was 1,000 years prior to Rise of the Eldrazi, so there were some Eldrazi showing up, but it showed Nahiri going through the world, experiencing the world, and experiencing the world's changes a bit, but still, one of the big parts of this story was how time was expressed. And it was done so well. They describe, at one point, Nahiri, and I'm jumping way ahead, but that's totally fine. Nahiri feels the Eldrazi broods or spawn walking the earth. And she feels the pain of them walking the earth through the stone. Because everything that touches the earth touches her, she said, when she's in her stone cocoon near the Eye of Ugin. And she feels that the Eldrazi brood are there. She breaks out of her cocoon, goes to the Eye of Ugin, and sends the message to Sorin and to Ugin, or to Sorin and the Spirit Dragon, as they call him in this one, as she was instructed to do, and as the plan was, for her to contact the two of them. They would come back and help her. Spoilers, we know they didn't, but that's a different story.
They
literally.
would come back and help her.
Yeah. And so, but she wakes up, she does what she's supposed to, she calls them, and then she's like, ugh, but they're still here, so puts herself back in a cocoon. And then James Wyatt does an amazing job of describing the time frame. She blinks and feels the denizens of Zendikar running away from the Eldrazi. She blinks and they're coming back with armies to fight the Eldrazi. She blinks and something else happens. And that doesn't mean blink like teleporting from one place to another. To her, the transfer or the change in years, decades, months, whatever it is the blink of an eye, because she is centuries old.
Right.
Multiple times in the story she asks, how long was I in there? How long did I just do that for? When she made the Hedron, she mentioned how making the Hedron network took 40 years. And that to her at the time, that felt like a lifetime. Then, this time, in this story, she puts the cocoon over herself, or a stone dome over herself, and starts making the Hedron. And now the Hedron's done. And she breaks down the dome. How long was I in there? She's completely unaware of the passage of time, because to her, as we learned in this story, many things to her at this point are completely inconsequential.
Well, not necessarily only that. We don't have a true concept either of how time works inside the Eye of Ugin. Right? Like, inside the Eye of Ugin,
well, it's not.
Time might not be the same as it is outside of it.
I would doubt it. That's a possibility. I would doubt it. I took it as, at least, I took it as that she was just, it was just a reference to the fact that she's been alive for so long, she's been sitting and waiting for so long that, even a day, a week, a month, a year is nothing because she'd been in there for centuries. So,
or it could even be speaking to like the sort of stasis that she might be in when she's in there.
Sure.
The sort of like glossed over kind of,
mental state or whatever.
Yeah.
We know we will get more of a context of that later on in these stories,
like
unless
being
that was
in a hyperbolic chamber.
sure. Hyperbaric. Hyperbolic is hyperbolic is from Dragon Ball Z. Hyperbaric is a real thing, I believe.
Oh.
I believe.
Okay.
I could be wrong. People can let me know in the comments. I believe that's how it goes.
Well,
hyperbolic
yeah,
is from Dragon Ball Z. Hyperbaric is real.
In those like pods where the water like covers your ears, but like you can breathe because it doesn't cover your whole face.
And the like lid is over you, so you like have no sense of the space around you.
Right.
You're just in a void, mentally, etc.
You're just like meditating in there
Mm-hmm.
for. I'm sure before you go in, it's disclosed to you what the period of time would be. But imagine doing that without that disclosure of how much time it would be.
Yep.
When you came out, would you know? Would you have any concept, really,
Right.
of how much time had passed? How much of that is based on our ability to use our surroundings and the things around us and our awareness of how the world works and stuff to estimate time. How much does being in that environment mess with our interpretation of that?
Right. And I've seen videos and stuff of situations where people are in like a formless room or, just like a space. And that is their space for however long, obviously because it's like a show or an experiment. There are cameras all around the room, but they're like hidden in the corners and stuff. And that they can keep basic track of time, like their body clock can keep track of time until they go to sleep. And as soon as they go to sleep, the moment that they wake up, obviously they don't have a clock or anything that would allow them to know the passage of time in that way. As soon as they go to sleep, the moment they wake up, they now no longer have an accurate concept of how long they've been in there. Because, at least from the experiments that I've seen, that's the tipping point. Once you sleep, by the time you wake up, you have no concept of how long you've been asleep. When you wake up, that, even for us who are people who, if we live a century, that's awesome. Congratulations. Yeah. But otherwise, it's going to be less than a century is our lifetime span.
That's, the typical.
Right. Some more, some less as life goes, unfortunately or fortunately. And so we can't understand what life would be like for a being who is alive for centuries. And this story focuses on that so much. Talks about the fact that Nahiri falls in love twice. That she meets people and befriends them and then goes to their funeral.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because for her, it's never ending. Her life is never ending, and yet all of these people's lives are finite. Mm-hmm. And again, if she's blinking and 40 years is going by, that means that's half of someone's life.
Or she's focused on one task, like building a hedron network, and it takes 40 years.
Right.
That's half of someone's life.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the fact that those are people that she's still forming relationships with, and yet they enter her life and leave her life in what would be the equivalent of like a day for us. And yet she's forming those tight emotional bonds with them. That's crazy. And the trying to fathom that is so far beyond what we would be able to understand.
Yeah, beyond our understanding, as well as heartbreaking.
Yeah, oh yeah. Well, and that's maybe why this story does what it does in making her go, no, you know what? This is meaningless.
Right.
Everything, in fact, now is meaningless. I don't know why I'm doing anything that I'm doing.
Right.
But I guess...
Well, because it's causing her so much pain.
Yeah. I guess it's...
To have so many separate grieving processes, you know, and then just have it all start all over again.
Right.
I mean, it's just never ending.
Right. And so soon to one another in her eyes.
Right.
Right. These people are being born, living their lifetime out, and then passing away. But to her, it's like, oh my God, you know, I formed this relationship with this person such a short time ago, and now they're gone already.
Right.
And now I have to start this all over again? Okay, well, let's do it. Okay, I did. And now they're gone already.
Right. Eventually you get disillusioned, you know, and you stop believing that it makes sense to do it at all.
Well, and it may be a method to protect herself at that point.
Right.
Even.
Yeah.
You know? So... there's that, and I mean, James Wyatt did an amazing job of showing that. Mm-hmm. The other thing that James did a very good job of doing, and this is something that James is known for, at least from our understandings of seeing his work previously and reading his work previously.
Oh, maybe you're going to make the point that I was thinking of making.
Oh, do you want to? Go for it. You can take it.
Well, I want to hear what you have to say.
Okay. One thing that James is
certain you were not going to say what I was certain when we sat down here that you were not going to say what I was planning to say. So
okay.
It'll be interesting to see how close you get.
All right. Yeah, the only thing I was going to point out is James is notoriously very good for discussing religion and discussing worship. And one of the other big points in the story, which actually I will say that I took this as a big point in the story, but that's because I'm aware of the other stories where the gods on Zendikar are discussed, aka the people's versions of the gods, which are truly the Titans, and how they look at those godlike figures with regard as opposed to with fear, which is as they should look at those gods, because they're not really gods, they're Titans. But that James does a really good job of showing, like, the statues that are built and the stories that are told, and how an innocuous statement, or at least what she believed to be an innocuous statement from Nahiri, which was, you core, we need to learn, I need to teach you people lithomancy, and I need to make you all aware of the fact that there are things in the mountain of Akum. And you need to know that these things are there because you need to make sure that they don't leave. So I'm going to teach you about the Hedron network. I'm going to teach you how it works. I'm going to teach you how to fix it if it needs to be fixed. But you need to understand that these things are here. And maybe it was a degree of old walker, right? Ancient being, believing that these people could not fully grasp and understand the severity of what an Eldrazi Titan is. So she took a shortcut and called it a god. That's something that you can all understand, right? It's a god. We don't want these gods to get out. That's bad. So watch out for this Hedron network. Keep it up, because we don't want the gods around. And then the gods came, at least their brood did, and she found that these gods were being worshipped. These, you know, that, and there was a statue of her with her arms extended, and behind her was Kozilek, or a depiction thereof, with his arms extended behind her. And she was Nahiri the prophet. And it was just her, she was like, oh my God. No pun intended. But like, look what I did. Look what these fools did. They misinterpreted what I said, and now they think that these gods or these Titans are gods. They're revering them as opposed to fearing them.
So what I was going to say was James Wyatt is a man of faith.
Correct.
He's a holy man.
Mm-hmm.
he writes the religious stories. And this is arguably the opposite of a religious story.
Good point.
But like they did back then when the story team wrote the stories, James Wyatt writes the religious stories. So this is a religious story that is not religious. This is a story of the impact that someone of power can have over other people with less power when they say such and such is a god. The impact that can have on the less powerful people, and the way that can be interpreted, or the many ways that can be interpreted. The importance, yet also insignificance, of rituals,
Okay.
shrines, things like that. These gods were false gods. Who better to write about false gods than a holy man, right? And this story did not feel like a holy man writing a story about gods that were false gods and the people worshiping them and the person who made the mistake of calling them gods. He wrote the story from the vantage point of a bit more above that.
Okay.
Having the knowledge of a holy man and the wisdom and everything that comes along with that, as well as being able to remove himself from that just enough to be able to write what it was actually like for the people worshiping these gods. Write what it was actually like for Nahiri to explain to them that they were gods, and then to find out so many years later the ramifications of that decision that she had made. And then to start to show, to continue to show by this time, the importance of keeping them contained, as opposed to letting the beliefs of the people now sort of dictate to Nahiri or have any influence on how important it is to keep them locked up. If they believed enough in them and believed Nahiri to be enough of a prophet, perhaps they would have purposefully let them out, which they didn't do.
Sure.
They're arguably, how much they revered them created enough of a connection that it drew them out. Almost.
Okay, well, and almost literally because of
she
the...
described the Hedron network being like brought too close to the edge.
Well, because the vampires made the throne, which disrupted the network. And in that space where the throne was where they were worshipping their version of Ulamog. And so the act of them raising that throne and building that temple, if you will, there, was what knocked that one Hedron far enough out of alignment that it allowed the Eldrazi to move just enough. The Titans to move just enough to allow their brood to begin infecting the world again. And once that was quashed and everything was returned back to normal, then we wait another 1,000 years until Rise of the Eldrazi happens.
Right.
But
so their love of these gods is what made them build that throne. What made them knock, the space between the Hedrons off.
Mm-hmm.
And create that little bit of a wiggle room for them to, start releasing things.
Right, and I don't know how much of it, because this is probably reading a little bit too far into it, but I don't know how much of it was, once they did that and the brood started coming out and killing people, because while she didn't mention it or it wasn't mentioned in the story, they had to have done it. I mean, we know from Battle for Zendikar as a whole, the brood kill people. That's kind of what they do. And if that was what they started to do, if it was like, we are worshiping Ulamog and now his disciples or his, angels or whatever that equivalent is for their worship, are now here. And, it's great to see you. You've come to save us. Oh, you're killing us. Oh. Right. And does that make them say, oh, we messed up? Or are they so set in their beliefs that they're going to say, those people are being saved?
Right.
Because we've seen that before. Yeah. Whether it's, a more organized form of religion or whether it's leaning more towards a cult-like religious following. Either way, that would be how a religion would look at that,
right.
And I'm sure I'm
Kool-Aid because
right. I'm sure I'm sure I'm simplifying it to a hopefully not offensive degree. And if people have other thoughts of a scenario that's like very blatantly obvious that I'm overlooking, I would love to hear that as well, as always. But for me, those are the first two things that pop up. Is either that would clue you into, oh, maybe we did the wrong thing, right? Maybe this is not what we should have been doing. Maybe this is not how we should have been worshiping. Or they look at it in the other direction and say, we're being saved, right? This is where our gods have brought us, or what our gods have brought us, and this is like the rapture, right? Yeah. Where these people are being saved, they're being killed or corrupted, right, or whatever, and
we're
changed
gonna let it
in
happen
that way
because it's meant to.
Correct.
Or you could even take it a step further. Maybe they would have gone crazy enough to think, okay, if our gods are destroying this world, we have to help them. Right. And because that means that it's meant to be destroyed. Right. I mean, there's like an extreme that it could have gone to that it came nowhere near. Right. Yeah. It could have gone so many ways and gotten so far off track. So, I think in the moment where Nahiri finds out that that's how the people were looking at the Eldrazi, I think she should have been a little bit grateful, maybe, that it didn't go drastically south. Sure. Because it could have.
Sure. I guess that's fair. It's a good point. The other thing that we actually get to talk about today, which I was super pleased about, is something that we haven't talked about in a very long time. And that is, back when we started doing this, we would find that there was at least one comedy moment or attempt at a comedy moment in each story. Mm-hmm. It's been so long since we've gotten to talk about that I genuinely had forgotten that it was a pretty regular thing on this show.
Yeah.
And the comedy moment in this one, I enjoyed it. You can tell me if you agree or if you agree. But the moment was when Nahiri enters into what I'm going to call the vampire temple, right, or the Ulamog temple. When she enters into that temple, the vampires that are there she sees like one or two, and they kind of scatter. And while she is in there looking at the statue and has begun to turn the statue into the Hedron to bring it back to put it back with the Hedron network as is needed, a bunch of vampires come in. And it's very Indiana Jones. Because it's going to be, there's going to be a fight now. The vampires all storm in, a big group of them. And she's like, do we have to do this? I don't have time for this. And they're like, you've defiled our... And then she goes, okay. And just collapses the roof on them and moves on to what she was doing over again. That's hilarious. Because, again, it's that moment of like...
so you're referring to the moment where he shoots the guy?
Yes.
Trying to hit
he's got the whip and he's doing all these crazy things. And then Indiana Jones just pulls out the gun, shoots him, puts it away, and moves on. And it looks like it's going to be this big thing because the dude's like doing all these tricks and stuff, and he's like getting ready to fight.
Jazzed. You're like, okay, I can't wait to see what happens next. And he's just like...
bang! Like, so casually. Like, bang! Moves on with his life, right? And Nahiri is just like... could we not? And they're like, but you did. And she's like, all right, fine. And just knocks the roof down.
I'll kill you. I don't care.
So funny. I loved that. So yes, very good comedy moment in this one. It's nice to have a good comedy moment every now and then. And actually, I will say, there were definitely moments, sorry for bringing up something maybe negative during positive things that we're discussing, but during War of the Spark, there were arguably some comedy moments with Rat and Teo, right? Where like Rat's being all crazy and Teo's like, what is happening with you right now? Like, so those are funny. I think it's just because it was the context of an entire novel as opposed to short stories like this where we could just pinpoint like, here was the comedy moment. Did it work? Did it not work? Like, so.
Well, and arguably the funny stuff from War of the Spark was a little bit more forced. It didn't feel organic the way funny things should. Yeah,
fair enough. I mean, again, they're whether they are considered to be comedy relief characters or not is a different thing as well. Like there were definitely the more lighter characters like Rat, Teo, maybe even Dak Faden in some cases. The lovable goof who then meets their end, and so you feel bad.
Yeah,
that's a
little bit too trophy.
Sure, but that's a whole different.
We're not talking about that story.
No, but I actually really enjoyed, again, now having gone back to like read this story after knowing what happens in the future. This story ends so beautifully, where Nahiri throughout this story she had started off loving, making friends, etc. In the middle or even a little bit towards the beginning, but after all the, finding love and making friends and going to their funerals, she gets to the point of none of this matters. Everything is pointless. Feeling absolutely hopeless. Arguably having at least a blip of a moment of like what would be compared to thoughts of suicide. Mm-hmm. Because she brings up...
and so much isolation.
Yes.
And just...
yes.
And like I said before, heartbreak and grief.
Yeah. Because she brings up when the Eldrazi brood come out, she says, she thinks for a second that maybe she should just let the brood take over the plane and take over her, to kill her as well in the process. And she wishes for that, but only for a brief moment and then moves on. Mm-hmm. So it's along with those feelings of hopelessness and etc. There was that brief moment of a glimpse of that. And then growing to walking through the plane and thinking of it as she knew it once she reawakens and seeing that there is such change and such destruction, but also things worth saving.
Yeah. And
so she goes back to, if I live, if I can succeed in this, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to meet people again. I'm going to make those relationships, forge those relationships. So she turns things around. And then she realizes, you know, kind of, because Amy, you brought up at one point when we were reading that you were like, but she's blaming herself or she's angry with herself, not with Soren and Ugin. And it was like, well, yeah, but
still.
Let's not forget, it's not still, right? And so that's why
it's prior to being still.
Right, because she hadn't even had time to focus on, well, they never responded. She's just like, oh, I don't know how long I went back in this cocoon after calling Soren and Ugin. I have to go back out there.
Well, she doesn't know the reason yet for why they didn't respond.
Right, and that's why the story ends the way it does, with her traveling from Zendikar to what we now know will likely be Innistrad. To being hopeful for meeting an old friend.
Right.
And if you're aware of how the Magic story goes, that will change very quickly through a pretty in-depth conversation. I believe, let's see how good my brain is, we'll come upon it, but I believe that's going to be a Ken Troop story. Because again, Ken Troop does a really good job of having stories where female characters go on these fantastical, like, existential journeys,
yes.
right, through things unimaginable to anyone here on this world,
right,
where we live. But that Ken Troop was the one that they penned to do those things. So we're back to, you know, with reviewing these stories, it's nice to be back to giving people who are experts at a particular kind of storytelling that type of a story, as opposed to what
good old days,
as opposed to what is now kind of required of you find someone that is a big enough name in fantasy or science fiction or both, who hopefully has a fan base, and you bring them in.
And you pretend that they know anything about Magic the Gathering.
Some do. These days. Some do. Some do not. But that they are brought in because they are professionals first, Magic lovers second, if at all.
Right.
Whereas, you know, these writers, these story writers are a team, and they're professionals, and they're Magic lovers. And so you can say, oh, it's a story about religion one way or another.
And they all had their individual strengths.
That's what I'm saying,
that
absolutely.
Were so different from one another.
Absolutely.
That they were the perfect team.
Yeah.
They weren't just a team. They were the perfect team.
Right, and that's why...
Because if you know what's happening in the next story, you know who's going to write it.
Yeah.
You can say, it's probably Ken Troop. Because I know what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
And he would be the best guy to write that story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's why people, I think, pine so much for the return of the in-house story team, and it's also why we are not on that bandwagon, not because we disagree, but because we're a little bit more realistic about things. You know, it's nice to want.
Oh, I'm 100% on that bandwagon.
Oh, I'm not.
But at the same time, like, I'm not, because if they did go back to the in-house story team, it wouldn't be like that. You know, they would make a team. It wouldn't be the perfect team.
Again,
so it still would never get to that point unless they went to the original team.
Sure. Which they can't. Those people have moved on because they had to.
And they have
whether they
now.
like to or not. Yeah. But I will say that's why I'm not part of that group. Again, not because I don't think it worked. I think it was fantastic. But there's only so many times you can capture lightning in a bottle, right?
Yeah.
And so to attempt to go back to it now wouldn't work, I don't think. And I don't want to say foolish, because that's rude to people who want that. But I want to say that I don't believe that the company would go back to paying multiple full-time employees to write a story a week and have that be, you know, what they've distilled down their model so far that I don't think that will be changing anytime soon.
Yeah.
Could it? Yeah. Should it? Maybe. I know a lot of people want it, so maybe, but...
You know, new people came to be in charge, and those people were like, I'm a business person, let's streamline this and make it cheap. Okay, but the quality's going to suffer?
Amy's the business major, so she's kind of mocking herself a little bit.
So... But they didn't care that the quality suffered.
Right. Because, well, and again, we talked about this a lot. I'm not really interested in going into this. There are many ways in which we have discussed this. There are many ways that other creators have discussed this well after we did.
Yeah.
But we're much smaller than them.
And we can continue discussing it until our faces turn blue and fall the hell off.
Right.
You know, but there wouldn't be a point in it.
No. And again...
Because there's no way they care about it nearly as much as we do, so...
And again... These stories that we're actually reviewing right now are good. So let's focus on that. Because, let's not forget, we will be back next week with another one. But please don't leave yet. We have one more very important thing to say, and then a bunch of other probably not as important things to say following it. First and foremost, if you are watching this on the day it was released or the day after the day it was released, Thursday or Friday, please stay tuned to this channel. If you do not have notifications on, you can ring that bell and subscribe, of course, first, to be notified when we go live, because we stream, by the way, every Monday and Friday from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Time here in the US. But this Friday in particular, if you are a fan of Magic the Gathering, we are going to be playing a different card game.
Yes.
One that you've seen on this channel before if you've been around for a little bit. In the past, we were gifted the 7 base decks for the new card game, Varia. And maybe you saw those videos from us, maybe you didn't. But this Friday, for the first time...
Go back and check them out.
You should. You definitely should. Because we went in depth. We did our Vorthos thing and looked at the cards, looked at the art, looked at the story elements, the flavor text, etc. From that game, which was done by a fellow Vorthos. And again,
so those aspects of it were very important to the creators.
Correct. And those decks were gifted to us, so appropriate disclosures as necessary.
Right.
Those decks were gifted to us with a request for us to review them, but we did not have to review them any particular way. Those are our actual opinions, looking through those cards. And this Friday...
And if you do go back and watch those videos, I would love to hear any comments that you would have based on any of our analysis of those cards. You know, I got to really get my, history galoshes on and get deep in that mud.
Yeah, and your art juices and stuff too.
Yeah,
so a lot more in depth.
If any of you have any juicy information, leave it in the comments. I want to hear it all.
Definitely. And also, so again, this Friday, 8 to 10 p.m., we are playing Varia for the first time on stream.
Yes.
We're going to be we're going to be joined by our friend Dave over at twitch.tv/DAM314. DAM314. I kind of stumbled over the D there. And you can take that however you choose.
Oh, yeah. Stumble over that D.
But God damn it. But you can come join us for a lot more of that, to be honest with you. But it's going to be a purely exhibition game. This is not like bragging rights. Who's going to win? It's if you don't know how to play the game, you should show up because it will be our first time playing it. We are going to try it out, and we hope that you enjoy us watching us play that because it should be a lot of fun. We want to hear you in the comments. We want to see you leaving your opinions about the game,
and
asking questions, absolutely. Because we want to hear anything and everything that you feel about the game. I think that it is drastically different than Magic the Gathering in all great ways from what I've seen so far, and I'm really looking forward to diving into it. So I highly, highly encourage you to check us out here on this channel from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time this Friday. And if you want to see more of that from us in the future, let us know. If you catch this after the fact, after that Friday, leave it in the comments. Say, hey, by the way, I want to see that Varia stream. When is there going to be another one? We will let you know as soon as we know. Right. And again, if we have...
Are we going to have a VOD for that? Or
the VOD will be up. Thank you. Holy crap. The VOD will be up on Video Games for All, which is our other channel. The link to that is down in the description box below, so you can go and find the VOD there as well. So please feel free to go check that out. Other things, like I said, less important, but still for us pretty important. We have another channel. We have 2 other channels, in fact. So we have Video Games for All, as I just mentioned, still uploading 3 times a week, just like this channel. And the Friday VODs are, or the Friday streams are Video Games for All streams. Actually, no, I lied to you. Varia will be here.
Oh, what?
I lied. Varia stays here. So the VOD will be live here on this channel as soon as it is done.
I wasn't actually sure which,
Yes,
which
it
of the
goes
2
here.
channels you were going to
It goes
decide
here.
to put it on.
Friday streams typically are Video Games for All. So almost every Friday stream from now on, the VOD will go to Video Games for All, but the stream will be live here. I know it's confusing. It's obviously confusing for me too.
Yeah.
It's new to us. But Varia is a
We're
card
trying
game.
this out.
Well, right. And Varia is a card game. The original Varia reviews were here. The VOD will stay here as well.
Okay.
So if you miss out on it, I highly encourage you to check out the VOD. You can comment on that as well. Excuse me. Especially if you want more streams like that from us in the future. Super important to ask us and check in with us on that stuff. Yeah. So, but yes, check out Video Games for All. Check out Gluten Free for All. Those links, like I said, down in the description below, along with our links to our socials, Twitter and Facebook. You can check us out there as well.
Yeah, Gluten Free for All it has on there right now is stuff from the Great Eldraine Bake Off, if you can remember that far back.
Yep.
But I've got lots of new material coming up.
And
that will not be Magic the Gathering related whatsoever.
No,
so
it's gluten-free related.
Yeah.
And if
so keep an eye out for that. Yeah, it'll be a little bit before it starts going up.
Sure, but things
There's
are
a lot.
Yes, and things are changing around here, as you can tell. Slightly different setup. Yeah. Look for that to change sporadically over the next couple of weeks as well. Maybe next week it'll be the same. Maybe it'll be drastically different. Who's to say?
We don't know yet.
We're moving things around here in the studio.
Yeah.
It's not a studio apartment, but it sure is an apartment. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, So we're changing some things around. I realized as we started filming this, I forgot my glasses today. They're right over there. I can see them, which is ironic because I don't have my glasses on. But so apologies.
And we keep forgetting our rings for these videos as well.
When you're sitting home all day, you don't get
we don't wear
accessorized
jewelry normally, and I very on occasion put earrings in just to make sure they don't close up.
Yeah.
So that one time that they closed up and they were kind of a little pussy, that was gross.
Oh, God, what a way to end the video. Okay,
It's a thing that happens.
Not to me, it's not. Anyway.
Well, you don't have any piercings.
That's true, I do
but
not.
But other people will understand.
Leave it in the comments.
Tell us about your pussy piercings.
Oh, God. Or tell us about how you're with me and you never want to hear the phrase pussy piercings ever again. Anyway, genuinely and sincerely, thank you so very much for watching this episode.
Yes.
We really hope that you enjoyed.
God bless you for getting this far.
Yeah, definitely. Any thoughts that you may have, that's what the comments are for. We really do appreciate any and all engagement. It really does. YouTube, the YouTube gods out there, really do like that engagement, but we really want to hear from you. Obviously, speaking of engagement, you can do all the other fun YouTube stuff like the video. I mentioned subscribing and ringing the bell. You can do the same on our other channels as well. But, very importantly, if you join us in the comments of this video, if you watched this video most, if not all the way through, if you're listening to me now, if you are coming to watch our Varia stream, if you go to the Varia VOD, if you're joining in on the flavorful discussions that are going to be had for that stream in these videos, etc., you are joining us and your fellow viewers in showing off our collective
#Vorthos Pride.
I know I didn't end it with our. I was trying something new. But that is going to be the end of this particular episode. Thank you all so very much for watching. We really are looking forward to hearing any and all of your feedback on anything that we're up to. Because again, 6 uploads a week, 2 streams a week.
There's a lot of it.
Yeah, it's a lot of things. So definitely stay tuned. We really do appreciate any and all support that you are willing to give. But for now, from us here at the Geek for All family of channels, I've been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And as we always say, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.